Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today we are looking at the TIE IN. I'm going to have a little bit of a dispute here with what we have on Wikipedia at some times. And as we kind of start out here, the TIE IN Space Superiority Starfighter, commonly referred to as the TIE, as they have it listed, the LN, the TIE Line Starfighter, the TIE Fighter, or the TF. Now, to me, it was never the TIE LN. Uh, I know I'm an old geezer at this point, but it's one of those. It was always we had the TIE, the TIE, twin ion engine, and this was an upgraded version as the Interceptor version before we had gotten what we typically look at as the TIE Interceptor. So this was the first foray into having a more dedicated interceptor tie. And then this also came with having a bunch of different variants that we will get into a little bit, just kind of mentioned into this. To me, that's always kind of a grinding point. It was never the line starfighter. It was always this is the interceptor version of that series. Now, of course, like I said, as things progress and we got things a little bit more refined, things went on from there. Now, um, okay, this is a signature starfighter of the Galactic Empire, the symbol of its superiority. It was seen as a massive, or seen in massive numbers throughout the most of the Galactic Civil War and onward. Occasionally, due to their distinct shape, the Rebel and New Republic pilots referred to the craft as eyeballs, and that actually comes from um, the Rogue Squadron books that they had come up with that in. All right. The TIE fighter was originally designed for the later upgraded TIE models, such as the TIE SA bomber, the TIE IN interceptor, which is what we're looking at today, the TIE D Defender, the TIE D Automated Starfighter, and many more. The TIE fighter was a descendant of the TIE twin ion engine starfighter and the TIE. Um, and they're just kind of taking the periods out of there. Really, it's the same. And was manufactured by Senior Fleet Systems. The namesake for the fighter of the line, or in its line from Senior Flight Systems, the PS4 twin ion engines that acted as its engines. However, it also became some degree was named after the type of clothing due to its overall shape resembling a bow tie. The tie IN engines was one of the most precisely manufactured propulsion systems in the galaxy, and with no moving parts, it's low maintenance. Unlike the TIE before it, the TIE IN supported independent generators for the engine and the weapons. Power conduits were attached between the engine system and the solar arrays for good performance. Now, the lack of combat shields, hyperdrive, and life support systems, in concert with the advanced engine design, reduced the mass of the fighter and conferred exceptional maneuverability. This also made them both inexpensive and quick to replace. Now, I'm going to throw this in here before we go any farther. We've seen this kind of retroactively kind of changed here a little bit, especially when you start watching like Rebels. Um, we'll see people jumping into a TIE fighter in Rebels, and they'll go out into space and not have any issues. Um, but the problem is, originally you had to have the TIE pilot space suit on in order to survive out in space. So this does change some things. Always keep this in mind. We're always, unfortunately, retroactively changing things whenever we go into the past and do a prequel series of some sort. And that's always one of the reasons why I don't really like it when people will take something and say, hey, let's do a show before this point, and then they inadvertently change some things in there that had always been kind of a rule, but they've kind of slipped over that rule by accident. It does change things there. So please keep this all in mind here. All right, primary armament was a pair of LS1 laser cannons coupled with a powerful sensor suite. The cannons were relatively powerful and well placed hits on a starfighter or medium sized transport could damage or destroy it. It did not carry missile tubes, but such weapons could be added if necessary. Due to the lack of life support systems, each TIE pilot had a fully sealed flight suit superior to their Rebel counterparts. The absence of hyperdrive also rendered the fighter totally independent on carrier ships. When deployed in enemy systems, the TIE IN also lacked landing gear, kind of. Another mass reducing measure, while the ships were structurally capable of sitting on their wings, they were not designed to land or disembark their pilots without special support on Imperial ships. TIEs were launched from racks and hangar bays. Now, again, that's something else that has been retroactively kind of done. And it's been pointed out, and it took me quite a long time, and I've watched A New Hope, the original Star Wars movie. I can't tell you how many times, but there is the point where Han is chasing a couple stormtroopers down a hallway with Chewie, and then they get into the hangar. If you can freeze that frame right there, you do see TIE fighters sitting on the ground. They are meant to be able to sit on the ground, but I will admit they need some sort of ladder system or whatever to try and get in there. You know, if we're going to get down this little rabbit hole, I'm sure there has got to be a way, and it doesn't have to be all that much. It could just be a very minor ladder system or whatever on the inside of one of the panels so that way they can climb up there without having that if they needed. And it really wouldn't cost them anything extra. It would just be a standard feature. So if we're going to kind of mess with this a little bit, and we're starting to show them more sitting on their wings as a standard landing gear if they're not in the racks, that is always a big possibility there. So I'm just kind of throwing that out here. Now let's see. Ties were designed to attack in large numbers, overwhelming the enemy craft. Standard attack squadrons consisted of 12 fighters, while full attack wings were made up of 6 squadrons. Other Imperial pilots considered TIE fighter pilots to be suicidal due to how expendable the starfighters were, which is kind of a yes and a no. The TIE IN has a structural integrity. The whole of as it's listed in West End Games as a 2D, which is kind of our standard. Um, it's not overly robust, but it's not very weak either. And then later on, as things kind of got changed, George Lucas himself, because of him and Gene Roddenberry, always went back and forth. They were kind of friends, so he had actually mentioned that all of the ships would have had a slight deflector shield. So in the game terms, then they kind of came around to the point in saying if you have a 2D in your hull, 1D of that would also be like a deflector shield. So it kind of has the shielding, but not kind of, you see how that gets kind of mucky there. So I'm throwing this out here. This is all, again, it's always things that happens after the fact, after we set and say, hey, this is what it is. And this is George's vision. No matter what happens in the future with Disney or anyone else, this is all originally George's vision. So we always have to take things in perspective. And unfortunately, when George came up with an idea and someone else took it and said, hey, but it should be this, we don't always get that same view. So in some regards, maybe the tie should have been a 3D. So 1D would have been their deflector, but it just is what it is. Um, so moving on here. Like stormtroopers, TIE pilots had their own identification, such as DS61-2. The first 2 letters indicated their posting, the next 2 or 3 digits indicated the squadron number, and the last number indicated the pilot's ranking in that squadron. This procedure reduced them to being no more than anonymous and standardized objectives of the Imperial war machine. This attitude was further reflected by the lack of any sentimental attachment to particular ties by TIE pilots, unlike Rebel pilots who often grew attached to their craft. As far as they were concerned, every fighter, whether reconditioned or factory fresh, were identical. They were considered as nothing more than tools, such as the same way the pilots were. Now, again, I also want to throw this in here. You know, when we look at the Empire, they were kind of drawn up, yes, kind of like the the German soldiers of World War II. Um, and they were just the faceless enemies, so just giving them a number or whatever. The other thing that George had always looked at it as the reason why the Rebel Alliance, even though they were outnumbered, won is because they spent more time personally outfitting their starships, their vehicles, their everything. These are enthusiasts that wanted extra speed, extra durability, extra whatever. So they tinkered with their craft to make sure it was the best that they could come up with. Now, the Empire just took a cookie cutter kind of formula and said, TIE fighter, here you go. Next TIE fighter, here you go. The nice thing about the TIE fighters, when you look at it, and when it was with Galoob and they had done the micro action fleet, which is now in modern day the um, or micro galaxy fleet or whatever that Hasbro's been doing, they actually show how the bottom of the ball there, actually that's the engine housing that can actually be pulled off and swapped and then put a new one put on. So if there's a problem, they can swap that out, throw a new one on there. Downtime is very minimal, and then they can get going again. um, it's just the way things are. Now, that doesn't mean that you couldn't have specialized squadrons that do take all this into effect, because they're now specialty squadrons or small specialty groups. If you wanted to do a imperial campaign, you could always say this is a specialty group that's just given a little extra leeway, and they outfit their own stuff however they choose, and that's why they would have hyperdrives and shields and so on and so forth that normal groups wouldn't have. Because we do see that in other shows where they got special ships or whatever. So just throwing all that out there. Now, the TIE Fighter also served as a propaganda machine for the Empire well. The philosophy between, behind their design revolved primarily around the assumption that only pilots were extensive or with extensive training would be put into the cockpits with skill making up for the lack of sophisticated onboard weapon systems and even defensive shields. And it was also written in some of these books where the pilots thought, it was the Rogue Squadron books, and they talked about the pilots themselves knew they were better than X-wing pilots because they didn't have to rely on shields. So it's just that propaganda that even got into their own heads. So the disadvantage of the fighter was its lack of deflector shields. In combat, pilots had to rely on the TIE-IN's maneuverability to avoid damage. The cockpit did incorporate crash webbing, a repulsor lift anti-grav field, and a high G-lock or G-shock seat to help protect the pilot. However, these did next to nothing to help protect against enemy blaster fire. However, despite the lack of protection, the fighter was at least able to survive glancing hits, such as when a quad laser cannon from the Millennium Falcon was able to hit a TIE fighter without actually destroying it. It did have some resiliency. It wasn't the best, it was just there. And that's just the whole thing I'm trying to get across here. All right, the TIE IN. Um, the twin ion engines were also notoriously easy to sabotage. All it took was moving an energizer out of alignment for the TIE's recharge systems to become time bombs. The side view of the TIE's radiator panels, curiously, resembles the emblem of the Confederacy of Independent Systems, but it is not clear if the similarity was intentional. The front slash rear cross section of the fighter was designed to be small to make it difficult to hit with blasters, but these side panels provide easy targets for flanking enemy pilots. They also hampered the fighter's ability to maneuver while in atmosphere. One of the other things I want to say, because we're talking about the tie panels, the straight TIE fighter, the regular old one, the panels weren't as big and they were kind of rounded, concave. Uh, but they went to the bigger panels to add that extra power needed for the upgraded weapons. So, being a second generation, to have it to say that yes, it looks like the Confederacy. I don't think anyone really saw it in that regard. I think it was just a natural progression here. And even when we get to the TIE Interceptor, uh, which I know that so many people have covered all this stuff, and some reluctance to try and cover some of this myself. Um, it's just the fact that the solar panels were actually getting more improved over time as well. All right, so history. The basic TIE fighter was designed at some point after 22 BBY and inspired a number of other Imperial starfighters manufactured by Senior Fleet Systems, which became collectively known as the TIE series. The TIE line fighter was one of them, and replaced the original model of the standard fleet fighter in the Empire. While the original TIE had performance parity with heavier built X Wings, the newer TIE IN boasted improved engines and more powerful weapons, surpassing contemporary Rebel fighters. Let's see, TIEs would be used in mass numbers throughout the Galactic Civil War and would be regarded by many as the symbol of the Empire. Some TIEs fell into hands of the rebellion, who would sometimes use them to infiltrate Imperial facilities. It had been intended that the TIE IN would be replaced by the TIE Interceptor as a direct result of the T 65 X Wing starfighters owned by the Lightspeed Panthers outperforming them in the Feihu campaign, resulting in 286 destroyed TIEs. Indeed, interceptors began to see greater use around the time of the Battle of Endor, but the collapse of the imperial government into sectionalism precluded this. As the Galactic Empire retreated, more and more factories found themselves behind the New Republic lines and ceased production. The New Republic made limited use of the captured TIEs, equipping them with shields and assigning them to sectors where they weren't considered the symbols of the Empire. Their most notable use in the New Republic service was at the Battle of Endor. Captured TIE fighters were also used for deceptive purposes, such as during the mission of Prefspelt 4. By the time the peace treaty was signed, the Empire, now known as the Imperial Remnant by others outside of the Empire, began to use um, export starfighters manufactured by other races, such as the Celestin Sorosub Corporation Prybird class starfighter, because they're lacked in manufacturing facilities to build new starfighters, or TIE fighters, I should say. All right, so behind the scenes, though, originally meant to have a blue hull, it was abandoned when blue screen filming made the fighters transparent. The original TIE IN fighters were seen in A New Hope and were relatively white. The ties of The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi were grayer, with a bluish hue added during the post production. Although the expanded universe material and speed chart used by the film crew of The Return of the Jedi shows the speed of the TIE fighter to be equal that of the X-Wing. A New Hope shows them overtaking X-Wings despite their ladder going full throttle. In Rogue Squadron series of video games, a TIE fighter is used as the basis for the game's sound test to test the input of stereo surround sound. It first flies forward or toward the player and then flies around the screen. In 2001 video games Star Wars The Galactic Battlegrounds, TIE fighters serve as the Galactic Empire's fighter unit and may be built at air bases in single player and multiplayer. 2005 video game Battlefront 2 depicts TIE fighters as having a photon torpedo launcher in addition to two laser cannons. However, this is most likely just a game mechanic, which, yes, it was, used to balance teams in gameplay. Whenever we're going back, we're trying to equal things out or whatever, things don't always work out the way that they really should be. All right, so we're going to end it here. We're going to get over to our D6 stats, and I do have a little bit of a write-up from one of the D6 books, so we'll go from there. All right, so looking at what we have here. So from the books itself, it does state that the Prime Imperial Starfighter, at the height of its power, the TIEs, the twin ion engine starfighters, were designed to be fast, but they were also light and very fragile. Prior to its defeat, the Empire never gave a second thought to sacrificing scores of these ships to accomplish goals. There were thousands more just like them. The TIE IN can be found stationed at Imperial outposts of all kinds throughout the known galaxy, and, short of a Star Destroyer, is the most visible symbol of the Imperial power. So, looking at the TIE IN Starfighter, now being from Senior Fleet Systems, the TIE IN, and I think the reason why a lot of people would refer to it as the LN is it's because the I is capitalized and you have the small or lowercase n. All right. So we have all of this coming from core books from the Thrawn trilogy sourcebook, Essential Guide to Vehicles, um, the standard role-playing game book. There's many different books that this is in, so it's all over the place, and it's all the same stats. So this is a space superiority starfighter, a starfighter scale, the length of 6.3 meters long. Has a starfighter piloting tie for a subcategory. Just the crew of one. If we're just doing it as a base, throwing up to go against our group, our starfighter piloting would be a 4D plus 1, and a starship gunnery would be a 4D. Cargo capacity is going to be about 65 kilograms inside here, and enough consumables for about 2 days. Now, cost is 60,000 credits used, or brand new, and 25,000 credits used. I was trying to find it somewhere in there, and I don't remember what book it is, and I was trying to look through a couple different books. There is a book out there somewhere, and it's actually got like an ad. If you buy like 10 TIE fighters, you get 2 TIE fighters for free or something like that. Kind of like a little, almost like a used car dealership ad. Um, Things that was thrown out into the West End game books, and it was always kind of funny seeing it. We do have a maneuverability of 2D and a space speed of 10. Atmospheric speed wise, we have a speed of 1,200 kilometers an hour. Here's our hull strength of 2D. Our sensor packet has a passive scan out to 2 kilometers at a 0D bonus, an active scan out to 4 kilometers with a 1D bonus, an active search out to 6 kilometers at a 2D bonus, and a focus out to 300 meters with a 3D bonus. Now, the weapons are the 2 laser cannons. These are fire linked. Of course, these are front. These are right under the chin, under the front window there. Fire controls are 2D and damage is 5D, which means that each laser cannon itself would do 4D damage individually. But because they're fire linked, it raises it up 1 extra die, which is a far cry from where we were. The cannons on the standard TIE, fire linked, My mind is playing games on me. I'm trying to think if it was Firelinked or if it was just the standard. If it was Firelinked, it was only a 4D. And if it was just the one, it was only a 3D. So this is a significant upgrade. And again, having a damage of 5D, even against X-Wings and all that stuff with their shields, is still something to be kind of nervous about. They can take you out without too much issue. And the fact that the smallest group you're going to really find is them running around in groups of two. So you're not only just taking out or trying to fight against one, you're really fighting against a minimum of two, if not more than that. And that always gets to be kind of deadly kind of dogfight, because always doing 1-on-2 is always more challenging, because you're not just trying to get behind one fighter, you're always worrying about that other fighter getting behind you at the same time. So, but that is what it is. With that being said, thank you so very much for joining me today. I know I've kind of rambled on some of this stuff. Hopefully, I've brought something to your attention that you haven't heard many times before. Getting into some of these, everybody's done them, which is one of the reasons why I don't typically try to get into these. And I've kind of waited here quite a while before hitting the old tie IN. It's just that it's been kind of beaten quite a bit by so many people. Um, but like I said, hopefully I've given you something extra there that you haven't really heard or thought about before. So, with that, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video.